Hello, here we are again in this do-it-yourself guide to lighting. This is the Electricians gallery. This is the sort of first level, and there's one level further up where we have the ropes. Here are a lot of spare lanterns, past 64s, Prelude 1630s, pattern 123, which is a Fresnel, pattern 23, which is the old-fashioned profile spotlight. Obviously, any lights that have little white bits of tape on have got no bulbs in, or correctly, no lamps in, if you want to use the proper technical jargon. These lights all pass their pat testing. They are quite handy, but you do need to have a special lamp which fits into this old-fashioned fitting. And you'd have to get those or order those specially from Lancelin, I would suggest, or possibly from CCT in Nottingham. That could be done before October if you wanted to, and Gary could bring them when he does the annual inspection. But these all passed their pat testing. They were rewired here in school a couple of years ago, and they are quite a handy sort of light. But at the moment we haven't got the budget, or we haven't put in for replacement lamps for these. Now, the lamps that operate in these lanterns are either 500s or 650s. They're tungsten halogen lamps, so they're like any tungsten halogen. You mustn't touch it with your bare fingers. If you do, when you're fitting it, you must then obviously clean it with meths. That's really important.
A clean cloth as well, yeah.
Or otherwise it'll shatter. And so that's something to watch and be careful about. They're quite expensive, the replacement lamps. When I say that, they're about £11 to £12, I think. But they might be worth thinking about and investigating if you don't get the new Source 4 par cans. If you get those, then maybe our decision not to buy spare lamps for these is a good one. They could easily perhaps be sold on eBay in the future if you're not going to use them. So that's those. Here you've got then the 1630 profile, again using the 650 lamp, usually I think it's T27. I don't think we've got many spares of those either at the moment, but this uses the same lamp as the little Preludes that we've got up in the studio as well. Very, very handy. Just one or two things with this. Obviously, if the connecting lead is plugged in, then you can't open the bottom because it's like a sort of safety feature. You have to take that out, and then the bottom releases properly. They're a bit old, but at the moment most of them are passing their pat testing. If you're getting the Source 4 pars, then these old par cans, the par 64s, are going to become increasingly redundant and obsolete. You can get them in 500s, possibly 250, but certainly 500 or 1000. But they use a lot of juice, but they are good for drenching a stage with lots and lots of light. But we are running out of bulbs, lamps, correct, for those. When you use a lantern on the floor as a spotlight, then it's called Birdie, and these two birdies are quite handy. Don't forget though, you must always use them with a heat-proof board underneath them, otherwise you've got problems with them overheating.
And hazard tape around it as well, in case someone trips and falls, yeah, to be sued.
And be careful a bit too of them getting very, very hot and being a bit dangerous to the touch, particularly if you've got kids around. And
curtains as well, no near cloth.
Yeah, just watch that. They're handy though, they're good. They do give you plenty of light, and they're quite useful in that sense. Obviously here we've got like the dimmer racks, and the control for those now is downstairs to switch on and off. There has been a bit of a problem with it tripping downstairs, but we'll show you that in a moment. You'll know that these are working when the red lights here, where it says main supply, are all on. If for any reason those are off, then obviously the system's not been switched on, or you've got a cut, or something has tripped. This old amp and the old mixer, as primitive as it may seem, does operate a show relay. You have to plug that in downstairs, and that will give you sound with 2 speakers in the little corridor near where the dressing rooms are. We think it's working. We haven't sort of tested it recently, but it is quite handy to have prior to a show. It's quite useful. Obviously, when you are adjusting lighting, you can move these huge lighting bars up and down with controls that are up on the top level. Be very, very careful though, because as you've got someone ratcheting them up and down, don't forget that the DMX cable here has to be kept loose and mustn't tighten, otherwise you can have a problem. There are little strings attached on pulleys that will gently move those so that you don't have a problem with tightening those unduly. Obviously you can use these controls at any time to bring the lights down, to clean them or to put colour in. Obviously you can also get them to a certain height where you can use the A-frame step ladder, which interestingly enough has vanished once more, or I can't see at the moment. There's another problem with this place. As soon as something's going on, people take things and don't know where they are. So that's not here at the moment. Often the ladder at the far end gets taken, nobody tells you where it is, and you have to start ferreting about for it. Very, very annoying and frustrating. I'm not going to miss that. I'm sure Andy will not miss that.
No.
There we are.
There we are.
I think, is there anything else that...
Not that I can think of. The only thing is when you're rigging lights, safety chains all the time, and not the old style chains. It's got to be one of the new high tensile steel cables chains.
Yeah.
You have to have one on every light, otherwise you're not insured.
Yeah, and you do need to make sure, you need to check that. That's very important.
And also on these lighting bars, you can see, if I just zoom in here, that there's a plastic. There's sort of like a plastic. It's not very visible on one side where the electrical cables are. You need to make sure that you rig any sort of brackets to the other side of that, so the wing nuts aren't putting any pressure on this, otherwise you can have a big problem electrically.
Because it's internally wired.
Yeah. But apart from that, I don't think there's anything else, no.
We just mentioned the moving heads. Obviously, when the moving heads are fitted, they are operating on 13 amp, not 15 amp. So just to remind you, obviously stage lights all operate. They used to operate just on 5 amp. Now they all operate on 15 amp, which means that they can handle 3 kilowatts of power. And of course, the reason that you have these round pin plugs is because there's no fuse in them. So all the fuses are in the rack, the dimmer rack here. And that means that if a light or a bulb fuses or blows, I should say, then obviously it might trip here rather than rendering the light completely useless during a performance. So everything is controlled here. That's the reason we do that. But at the moment, the moving heads are operating on 13 amp, basically. So therefore, Andy's had to sort of rig a cable along the lighting bar externally down to the mains, and then for dimming and control purposes, an XLR cable as well, which then goes back to the desk. That unfortunately doesn't conform with lighting regulations. So
you advise probably not to do that in the future,
yeah,
you'd have to say.
Yeah, Gary, obviously what he will do is if you set it up in October and try and use it, he will take it down, and you can only really put it back up once the pat testing has been done in October afterwards. But that's something maybe to consider for the future, really.
Getting that permanently, professionally sort of put up.
The only way that could be done would, of course, would be to replace these dimmer racks, which are probably now obsolete from that point of view. And that would mean then, obviously, presumably also replacing the bars, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.